Hello folks. Well, welcome to our grand finale. After a good week and a half on the road through New England for a second time to redeem ourselves and get all the locations down that we didn't get last August, we are here in Massachusetts, and well, it's not every day we get to arrive in Massachusetts. This was one of the most difficult states to visit thus far in the country, and so we have to end it off with Massachusetts' grand old capital city, largest city, and cultural hub. Welcome to Boston. This is Beantown for you. We're actually right now in a very historically famous part of Boston. Boston is a huge city with a population of 680,000 people today, and well, there's plenty of things to see, as we'll see today. But right now I want to start off our day here at the famous Boston Harbor. Now over there is where you have the real heart of the harbor, but this is still technically part of it. This series of wharves here in, I guess, one of Boston's various channels of water. That itself is an amazing feat. Just the amount of bodies of water from rivers to lakes, even islands in the little harbor. Boston's geography is really cool, but I'm getting led astray with the off-topic conversations. Here we are in Boston Harbor. For decades and generations, Boston was one of America's greatest ports for trade around the world. Historically, you could have seen tons of ships docked around these waters. The famous commodities of molasses and rum and sugar and all that good stuff were all imported here, as this was a very, very big center of commerce. Another thing that was imported here in Boston, it was tea. And yes, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. This is the exact spot where the angry colonists of the Massachusetts colony dumped boxes of tea off the ship disguised as Wampanoag Indians. They dumped the tea, as was demonstrated earlier, off these ships as an act of protest, to protest the tyrannical rule of the British government, taxing the colonists so heavily without any sense of voter representation. Now, there were a number of factors that really sparked the American Revolution, but what really sparked a sense of anger and rebellion was this Boston Tea Party. And here in Boston, even today, it's known as a city where people are not afraid to show a bit of rage or anger if they are upset at you. And this Boston Tea Party is a perfect emblematic representation that throughout all of history, Bostonians were like this. They had that fighting, rebellious spirit in them up to today. But anyway, we have a big day ahead of us. Boston is the largest city in New England. It's a huge city with plenty of things to do, so we better kick off this day very quickly. We have a lot in store, and I'm very excited. I've been wanting to go to Boston for a long time. It's not my first time here, but it's the first time we get to go here on the coverage project to finish off our New England excursion part 2, the sequel. So let's kick it off. We are now walking through the oldest city park in the United States. A lot of things in Boston are very old, and this park is no exception, being the first park for a city environment. This harkened back to the days of colonial Boston and Massachusetts. Boston was founded around 1630 to adhere to the interests of those puritanical settlers who wanted to have their own utopia. You know, that shining city on a hill, and that's what Boston became in those early days. The park we're walking through, the Boston Commons, was first used as a little cow pasture, but then turned into a spot for whippings and hangings for people who dissented those puritanical beliefs. And it is the Boston Commons which starts a very long historical trail that a lot of people who come to Boston do. So what I'm trying to explain is that Boston has so much preserved history that a couple generations ago it was decided that there would be this whole trail through countless different historical sites relating to, well, Massachusetts as a colony, and then how Massachusetts, and specifically Boston itself, led the way for America to get its independence. And for most of this video, we're going to be walking along the Freedom Trail because that's where most of those historic cultural sites are. It's all laid out on this twisty but orderly path through the downtown of Boston. So without further ado, let's begin our journey through time as we walk along the Freedom Trail to learn about Boston's role in the Revolution. The great thing about this trail is that it's marked with a brick road. So all we gotta do is really follow the red brick road. It may not be a yellow brick road, but it still does the job. Well, Boston is known for so much, culturally, historically, with such significance to American history that sometimes it's kind of hard to remember. Boston is the state capital of Massachusetts. Yes, we are here at the capital of the Bay State, and there is the Massachusetts State House. From the brick facade to the golden dome on top, you can tell that the Massachusetts State House is a little bit different from most other state capitol buildings. And I kind of like it that way. It gives it that old colonial nature for such an old state. On any other day, for any other state, I would love to go inside, but we have such a jam-packed day, I cannot afford to just take an extra half hour or so to explore the inside. We are on a very, very fast pace today, so let's move forward and continue on the Freedom Trail. We're now here at the Granary Burying Ground, and this reminds me of our time in Hartford, Connecticut, because all around New England you might be able to find graves that date back 300 years, maybe 350 years even. The preserved field of tombstones really speaks volumes to how much Boston is really into preserving its history, and that's a good thing, because then we get to see the actual graves of famous people like Sam Adams, a famous founding father. You may recognize him from the beer you might drink. I don't know, is it just me, or do New England grave sites and cemeteries give off this creepy, eerie feeling? And here lies John Hancock. Yes, that John Hancock who wrote his signature on the Declaration of Independence so much larger than everybody else who signed it. Now imagine the confidence it would take to say, "Here I am, British, here's my name on the Declaration of Independence." Because, I mean, it was a revolution of serious proportions. If the Americans lost, well, all the people who signed their name, they would be goners. They would be hanged or killed somehow. So anybody who signed their name on that was a huge commitment. We're spending way too much time here, but we gotta get moving. As old as the Granary Burying Ground was, this is even older, the King's Chapel Cemetery. I just want to take a moment and admire how narrow these streets are. Just like Providence, Rhode Island, which we visited last August. Boston has the same thing, where the whole network of roads within the major city was developed way before the advent of the automobile. So of course, you're gonna have these small, cramped brick streets. So for a good 150 years after the founding of the Massachusetts colony, the state was pretty complacent with the demands of the British. It only occurred that after the whole concern of taxation without representation, that the people of Massachusetts started to become very angry. And a lot of concern originally was very calm and orderly. But what I'm standing in front of was the real catalyst which set the whole independence movement off. People think of it as like the first gunshot of the Revolutionary War. Right behind us is the site of the Boston Massacre. Now this building in front of us is the old Massachusetts State House, and a little skirmish between British soldiers, the Redcoats, and just local people here living in Boston escalated into few unfortunate casualties. And that fatal incident in 1770 changed everything. And so now the colonists were thinking, if the British, if they're to abuse their militaristic power on us civilians for the purpose of just quelling the skirmishes, what else could they do in the name of trying to pacify us in our quest for liberty and fair representation? Now we're walking through Quincy Market, one of my favorite places in Boston. Why is it my favorite place, or one of my favorite places in Boston? Well, when I was younger, I visited here, and I spent hours here at Quincy Market, basking in just the awe of all the shops in the Central and North and South markets. In the center, you have what's basically a glorified food court. On the outside, you have the real Boston shops. Some familiar names, some unfamiliar names. I don't know, maybe when younger I was a little more materialistic, but this place gives me fond memories. Yeah, I'll just take a small of the New England clam chowder. Yep. All right, thank you very much. We're in New England. We're in Boston. What else am I supposed to get from Quincy Market? New England clam chowder? Naturally. Now, we tried this in Providence, Rhode Island, along with some clam cakes, but I'm not sure if Providence does clam chowder a bit different than Boston. I've got to see that for myself, though. Now, as far as my palate goes, I can't really taste a difference. It is amazingly delicious, though. And even if you're kind of averse to seafood, the clams are a nice touch to this soup. I would recommend it even if you didn't like fish or bottom feeders or crustaceans or any type of sea life. Now, I could be completely wrong. There could be a difference between Boston and Providence, maybe even Maine's version of clam chowder, but it's been almost a year since I had clam chowder back in Providence, so I can't really tell all that much. But yeah, that heavenly mix of a creamy broth, potatoes, and clams, all in one great batch, is sure to give you that momentum on a long, eventful day here in Boston. Anyway, back to the Freedom Trail. So we've now walked up to the north end. Now the north end is by definition a little bit north from the downtown, but this is the true heart of Boston's Italian community. Yes, there's an Italian community, a huge one in Boston, comparable to the likes of the one found in New York City. But behind us, if we take a few steps back, of course, I'm walking a little too fast for my own good, we can find this old colonial house right over there in front of us. And who owned that house? Why, it was Paul Revere. Yes, Paul Revere was the guy who rode on a horse and warned us all about how the redcoats are coming or the British are coming. Yeah, there are parts of the American Revolution which are sort of romanticized and turned into more of a folk tale, even though that was a true event. Historically, kind of. Oh yeah. Even more old grave sites and cemeteries. Now what's this Washington Monument looking structure doing here in Boston? Well, I'll tell you, it's not the Washington Monument, it's the Bunker Hill Monument. Fueled by the several acts of rebellion leading up to our War of Independence, both mentioned and not mentioned by me today, it was here in Boston that the first real battles of the Revolutionary War happened, one of which was the Battle of Bunker Hill. That's actually kind of a misnomer. The battle was fought on Breed's Hill, not Bunker Hill, but whatever. The more important thing is, we are done with the Freedom Trail. The Freedom Trail ends right here at this giant obelisk monument dedicated to the sacrifices made here in Boston for the sake of the revolutionary cause. Due to the incendiary and free-spirited nature of the colonial Bostonians, a war took place for a number of years and did not end until the Treaty of Versailles in 1783, which finally allowed us to independently govern ourselves as a country. Have, at long last, finished our day here in Boston, Massachusetts, capital of the Bay State, and so much more, of course. It is a city with a critical amount of preserved American history that I think every American should go to and visit, even if it's for a day, just to get a great understanding of why this country exists, how it came out to be. So there we have it. That not only ends our day here today, but it ends our entire New England excursion, the sequel, Part 2. It was a good, long week and a half filled with a lot of content that I really wanted to get done last year. But better late than never. I gotta say though, Boston is of course a huge city, and there's naturally so many places that I wish I could have spent. But the day doesn't last forever, neither do our adventures in one given place or one given region. I'm sure we'll be back in Boston someday. You know, I would love nothing more than to park the car in Harvard Yard, but that could be saved for another day. Gotta love the Boston accent. But anyway, that ends our day in Boston. We have, of course, much more adventure coming up. We have 28 out of the 50 states, and I'm hoping to get a good slew of them down before the year ends, and that's why I'm planning a big trip in the future. I won't say where, but it'll be exciting. Just like Boston was a transformative city whose spirit and culture transformed the country from a loose set of colonial dependencies to a united nation, America, that could represent our adventures too. Just because we're ending our trip here in Boston does not mean the adventure is over. We are on to greater things in the future. So with that said, sitting here at the Bunker Hill Monument on a nice, peaceful June day, ending our second venture into New England with future prospects of future travels. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.